So welcome to episode 3. In this episode we'll be talking about the typical look of witches, modern day witchcraft and how it's changed over time. I'm once again joined by the lovely Lara and the lovely Holly.
Hi.
To discuss this.
Round 3.
Yeah. Round 3, here we go. So I'm going to kick it off with a great question.
Ooh.
What is your typical look of a witch? Because obviously I know in modern day and everything you've got some weird and wonderful ways witches have been portrayed in the media. However, when you think witch, what comes to mind?
The common, I guess, we talked about a little bit in episode 1, the common theme is that broomstick, dark clothes, hats, flying around,
big nose,
warts, big nose. Even that's portrayed in children's books, like
Winnie,
Room on a Broom, Winnie the Witch.
Winnie the Witch.
They all have their, they all look a certain way. They're very similar.
Also, we studied in GCSE English Macbeth, and so I obviously have the whole. Went and saw it at a theatre near us, and it was so I obviously had that depiction of 3 witches kind of
that kind of
around a cauldron,
old woman, kind of a bit not
Up to
weird,
no
but
good.
that kind of mystic kind of aura.
Or even if you think about Wicked.
Green skin.
Green.
And
completely different.
But
as well.
Macbeth will be a very
Quite
key.
destructive.
Macbeth is one of my key
Even
points, which I'm going to evaluate a bit later on.
even the Wizard of Oz, that's
Wizard of
quite-
Oz.
That's true. You don't even realise you mentioned that. And
Hocus
I completely
Pocus.
Hocus
You've got
Pocus,
Roald Dahl, Grandpa Witch.
Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
God, that's like an
Even
old
Harry
film as
Potter,
well.
but even Harry Potter, you get wizards and witches, but even
But McGonagall's quite that,
typical. She's not got warts,
yeah.
but she's got the hat and she's got the cloak, and they all wear cloaks.
Yeah, in the Marvel universe, got Wanda, Doctor Strange.
And that's the different. It as well. But yeah, so I'm going to kick it off with, again, typical look of witches. So this was taken, again, from the English Heritage website and written by Diane Purkis. So familiars are really, president in, the image today. So especially black cats.
Yeah.
And she discussed, how this idea developed. So the witch's familiar was usually a small animal. So a familiar... it's like a sidekick. Sidekick, a thing
even
that...
black cats are superstitious, aren't they?
Yeah.
I've been
you're not
talking
meant
about
to look at them.
see a black
my gorgeous black cat that I have.
That's a sign of bad luck.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's even rooted in that,
and
isn't it?
It's it walks across your path or something,
Yeah.
and you're bad luck.
So the witch fed the familiar, and in return, it might grudgingly act out her commands. So a good idea that I thought of this. So, Maleficent. I know she's not a witch, but she's odd. Not odd, but in that mystical sense. But she has that
she's a social
crow.
outcast, isn't she, really?
She's also all black.
Yeah.
And she's got, she's different from the rest of the
She
society.
has that crow that turns into a man as well. So that's kind of the sidekick idea. Yeah. So it's in fact the kind of fairy known as the household brownie or hob. These creatures were favour cream and have to be appeased by constant offerings of it, or they can start to behave like poltergeists.
Oh, wow, okay.
So spirits.
So is this sort of more old times?
So this is back in the day.
Back in the day.
So it was therefore assumed that they could be put to work ruining the work of other householders. Familiars may also be related to the Norse fylgja or fetch, a person's double who can shapeshift into animal form. So in the last episode I talked about there was that thing of how to protect yourself from witches and don't let the familiar cross the path.
Yes.
So
into, your
yeah.
land
So if a witch's familiar came in, you'd be out now. You don't want that. That's given bad
But these
omens.
could just
Bad.
be animals that these women had.
So
it's just an animal, isn't
I
it?
love
Really?
promoting this series. It's a great series. So Witchfinder again, BBC, and they accused her of killing this pig, but they said, well, you're odd, you're not married, you go to the pub all the time, and you're chicken. And she's like, but it's just a chicken. Yeah. But you hug this chicken. Yeah, but it's my chicken. So again, the idea that she had a familiar in this series. So
It's
these...
almost like having pets is, again, your downfall, isn't it?
Exactly. So these, familiars were associated with a person's luck or fortune. So they're learned in the 17th century. However, it was the familiar was the devil, according to some people. They are mentioned in 1566 Chelmsford witch trial, where the familiar in question resembles a human being. The idea that you can separate out part of yourself and a part may exactly look like you.
Oh, so they thought that, you know, a witch could like almost copy herself,
yeah, like
and
an
put it in
extension
animal
of
form.
But another thing that I've just realised is you think of Voldemort and Harry Potter and the Horcrux. So he has Horcruxes.
There are extensions of him himself,
So he
aren't they?
extends. So he can't die. He extended himself in certain inanimate objects.
And that's quite echoing with witchcraft
Yeah.
in the old days, yeah.
And also, it's like, it seems to be used for evil. Like, it's all very bad connotations of these familiars.
And you could send your familiar to work on the bodies of others, and it's essential to the idea of witchcraft. Whatever the origin, familiars come out of the popular underworld of ideas and tales. In places in England, you can almost feel it under the soil, the weight of the past, and our ancestors could feel it too, basically, is what she said.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So, next website was Historic UK, Witches in Britain by Ellen Castlow. And most supposed witches were usually old women, poor, I've touched on this before, who were unfortunate enough to be crone-like, snaggle-toothed, sunken-cheeked and having a hairy lip, were assumed to be possessed the evil eye. If they also had a cat, this was taken proof, and witches always had a familiar, the cat being the most common. So,
okay. So there was a specific look that people kind of grabbed onto.
So yeah, so
it's like in old London, England, when criminal was
have a certain look.
meant to look like a certain way, and if someone looked like what they perceived as a criminal, it was almost certainly going to be them.
Yeah.
I remember there's this children's show. So you know the book series The Worst Witch?
Yeah.
It was made into a TV series on CBBC, and I used to love it. But I remember there's one episode where one of them, well, they grew a wart. They didn't actually grow a wart, but they'd like done a spell to like make them grow a wart, because it was like that wart was a source of all knowledge. And it's quite interesting how, like, I don't know, how do you think that would have come down? Like, that's such a, when you think of a witch, you think of a wart.
Yeah.
And like that's the knowledge and that stuff. But why?
Well, again, Nanny McPhee. That's one thing I just thought. That so obviously she is the other way around, but she loses it. But it's still the idea of sorcery, isn't it? And weird magical, and her crow's her best friend. And the crow seems to be crows that are very heavily used in modern day.
That kind of dark animal.
Because they're signified with death, aren't they, crows?
Yeah.
Also,
and, you know,
that
cats
like
and superstition.
Yeah, there's like a building in London or something where they have to keep like 3 crows in.
So that's Tower of London. So so they have to keep.
It the Tower of London?
So they have to keep crows. They have to keep a certain amount of crows, otherwise the tower will fall.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the belief. So crows are weirdly linked.
It's all rooted in superstition, isn't it? And that kind of, I guess, harks back to what we learned about previously. You know, it's all like people just being wary of others and stuff.
You could even link superstition to witchcraft, really.
100%,
well, I feel like a lot of it is
it's a lot of superstition. It's all like, you know, I might suspect them of doing that, and, you know, that means I'm going to be cursed.
Yeah.
There's no, like, isn't it?
solid facts, really.
There's never any real evidence. We're all going off people's feelings and how they don't want to be cursed, really.
Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about the history of Halloween and what's the real history of Halloween and why do we celebrate it on the 31st of October. And this was written by Blair Doven and Marissa Gold.
Is this because, obviously, witches are quite, you know, they're a costume now, aren't they?
So you think, what do you think of Halloween?
I dressed up as a witch when I was younger. I mean, I'll say that.
I dressed up as a black cat.
So,
yeah, exactly. Black cats, witches, demons, weird things.
Yeah,
I think everyone has. So this was taken from a country living website. Very random. However, so the history of Halloween goes all the way back to the pagan festival called Samhain.
A lot of our, you know, holidays and stuff come from pagan festivals. I think that's worth noting.
Yeah, the word Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve, meaning hallowed evening. Hundreds of years ago, people dressed up like saints and went door to door, which is the origin of Halloween costumes and trick-or-treating.
Oh, interesting.
So you already know that Halloween takes place on the last day of October, but there's something you might not know. The word itself literally means hallowed evening, and previously known to early date European celebrations, All Hallows Eve again, and All Saints' Day, which is the 1st of November, both paying homage to saints or hallows. The name was eventually shortened to Halloween, which we know and loved to this day, basically. Halloween falls on October the 31st because the ancient Gaelic festival of Samhain considered the earliest known root of Halloween.
So if they were like, did you say saints?
So basically they used to praise saints. So it's all linked to religion again. So they would praise saints on All Hallows Eve. Yeah. And then this was brought in and changed into a massive marketing ploy. Basically.
I'm not sure if it was, but I think that was I don't know if it's true, that was an American.
Yeah, very American invention. But you could also link it to Salem, and you think of how...
Yeah, Salem witch trials, So it all comes back to witchcraft, really, doesn't it?
So basically, it all marked a pivotal change of time of year. But most importantly, the observers also believed the boundary between this world and the next became especially thin at this time, enabling them to contact the dead.
So we're talking about other worlds now and stuff here, aren't we? Did they ever think that witches could talk to dead people or that kind of thing?
I don't think that was it. I think this All Hallows Eve, the witches was mainly obviously cursing people and just wanting to work with the devil to cause sin on this earth. I don't think it was mainly to talk to other people. Yeah. However, All Hallows Eve is obviously, it's kind of like the Day of the Dead, isn't it, in other cultures as well, where you feel like you can connect with...
Yeah, with like your past loved ones.
Yeah, so the early pagan holiday of this involved a lot of rustic ceremonies connected to spirits. While there isn't a lot of detail, really, they believe that the Celts celebrated in costume and disguise against ghosts. So this is Gaelic country, so you've got Ireland and you've got Scotland and you've got like the Cornish and Devon. So they enjoyed feasts and made lanterns out of gourds, which is like a squash. So that's how pumpkins
come from.
Yeah,
interesting.
So over time, as Christianity took over, the pagan undertones of the holiday were lessened and the basic traditions of the holiday remained part of pop culture, basically. And it just evolved and modernised. So this was, I'm guessing,
things, really, isn't it?
A lot of this was predating Christianity or at the very start. So in lots of Catholic beliefs, they believe in saints. So I'm guessing this is where a lot of it has come from. So many people were said to dress up as saints and recite songs or verses door to door. Children will also go door to door.
It's like how we've evolved Christmas, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
From, the old pagan festival it used to be with just, bringing in trees and stuff like that. Everything kind of evolves and gets modernised as we, much like witchcraft has.
And becomes a business.
Exactly.
And what was his name? Hopkins. Yeah. It's all turned into money again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So children would go door to door asking for soul cakes, similar to like biscuits. And this eventually became part of the Halloween night and the concept evolved into trick-or-treating. Sweets came in the early 1900s in America.
How we're not taught about this.
No.
Unless you go and research it yourself, with the origins of Halloween and like the reason behind it is completely lost. Really.
It's like a lot of things, really, isn't it? Yeah. Everyone gets swept up in, what's considered normal and what we do.
Yeah, but I was never allowed to go trick or treating because my parents were like, "You're just encouraging." Yeah. My mum is a Christian, and she was like, "You're encouraging the devil and stuff."
Yeah.
I never got it because everyone else was going.
Yeah.
Trick or treating, but it makes a bit more sense now that you actually explain that. Because of the origins and stuff.
Yeah. So the costumes evolved too. They began with tributes to saints, like I said. But at one point, until young Scottish and Irish pranksters got the idea to dress up in scary-looking costumes and spook neighbours. And just like that, Halloween costumes became scary, spooky, funny and creative.
When one person does something, it catches on. We talked about trends earlier, weren't we?
Like that year of Harley Quinn and everyone in like 2016 dressed as Harley Quinn.
Yeah, because it's just trends, isn't it? And people catch on and then that's it. Like, Halloween caught on, and then now it's a thing. Yeah.
So, moving on from obviously lovely Halloween, So we're now going to talk about landscape hinting at the past, and again, English Heritage website by Diane Purkis. So they believed that so if you go anywhere in the countryside, normally they had large green humps. So an example of this I researched was a place called Kingley Vale down on the south coast, and basically they were burial grounds among for the village. And it is whispered if you came to places like this on All Hallows Eve, you can see the dead rise along the road. So it's a lot of spirits, isn't it? And they can't pass across until they stop there. It's unlucky to see them. If you catch the eye of one of the riders, you might be able to win supernatural powers of healing prophecy that will make your fortune.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it's a lot of mystical beliefs and stuff of people rising from the dead.
Like
and
otherworldly kind of thing.
And you'll gain fortune from it. So the vicar in the village tells you that the dead that remain in earth are all of those condemned to hell. Some people say that the dead rhinos withered in flames and the saddles of red hot iron. So again, linking to the idea that the witches were made to hold red hot iron, so that could maybe link together. You know, the idea the devil's hot, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, those that fire and red. I think colours are real imagery there. We've got the black cats and the black crows
and
the red. It's all dark colours, and then white's a symbol of purity, isn't it? And you know, goodness.
White and yellow is associated with God, and red and black with the devil. So it's very much even a contrast in just the colours that we think of.
Yeah, exactly. So those people say that if you do not get any power from the riders, the power of the hells and the devil. So they believe if you get power from these so-called riders, you get the devil in you again. So this is again moving slightly away from the idea of witches maybe into the later years and believing, or even, you know, predating witchcraft of maybe how the way devils would work. But then obviously the idea of witches brought in and that changed the whole game.
Spirits and the underworld and like death and...
So, but other people think differently. They think the dead remain on earth are not demons but elves. So under these lumps of rock, beautiful sunless land, basically it's just where the elves live. So it's again...
So it's all kind of that kind of fantasy, but maybe not.
But, so even bringing into James I in his demonology, you know, bringing in ideas of elves, werewolves.
Yeah. Just people just want to believe in things that aren't.
Yeah.
You know.
They want to have a story behind everything. Like if there's something there has to be an explanation. Yeah. And I feel people just kind of create one.
Yeah. And then it catches on and that's it.
Because people want answers.
Like Halloween, you know, that was a pagan festival and now it's a multi-million pound holiday almost, you know.
Much,
exactly.
So half term. That's where we get that off.
Exactly. Pumpkin patches, honestly, it's insane.
Isn't it? And but it rooted in paganism.
So the dead yearn for the lives they enjoyed, which means that they want to take back from the living. So these are these spirits under the ground, remain that they were buried. Separation of self-body or soul and body may take months and years, and may never happen to those who are destined in indemnation. So the places where pagans bury their dead were especially fraught. Pagan dead are like nuclear waste. You can bury them, but that does not mean they're gone. Anyone willing to feed them on blood can hope to put them to work in a series of worrying deals. This is where the familiar of the witch begins to take shape, like dead fed on blood and the dead. So basically, again, that idea that probably maybe one of the origins why they burn witches, because they believed if they just killed them and buried them, their spirit is still there and there's still possibility for the devil to pop out and jump on someone else.
Burning them was a surefire way of releasing the devil, supposedly.
Exactly.
And this so it all comes back to kind of death, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, releasing spirits.
It's the whole idea of releasing the devil from that person.
Yeah, and being, like, within people. And it's more of a soul thing, not a person thing. Like, the devil kind of attaches itself to your soul, and then your soul can leap out, and then, obviously, it attaches to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. So, after all of that, really unusual and weird spirits and everything, we're going to go through time now. So, we're going to go and have a little chat about modern day media. I know we've touched on it a little bit. So, could you name me 3 famous witches in modern day media?
I mean, Hermione, obviously. Wanda from the Marvel series. Oh, and
Mildred Hubble.
Yeah.
I love it.
Winnie the Witch.
Yeah.
What else was there? I think that's definitely 3. But
I can give you some more because I do love a bit of historical.
Go for it.
So there is a witch in Game of Thrones, Melisandre.
Mm-hmm.
She gives birth to a cloud. Really weird.
Oh,
it's really different. You've got Outlander, like I mentioned in an earlier podcast.
Oh, there's Discovery of Witches. I haven't seen
Discovery
that.
of Witches.
Really good. Yeah.
They love referencing witches in historical period dramas.
Macbeth.
Hocus Pocus, that's another example I have on here.
Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus is very
But there's
proper.
a familiar in that, isn't there? Mm-hmm. And the candles and everything like that. And
exactly.
Death and that kind of thing. And children attacking children.
Yeah.
So that's real, historical, that one.
So, we're going to thought we could have a little chat about Macbeth and kind of how witches were firstly, I believe this is kind of the first way witches were really put into the media and something that could move through time.
Right.
So obviously we know good old William Shakespeare created this play of Macbeth, and he played and he kind of wrote it for his audiences, and you can tell because we all studied it at GCSE. And basically you only get snippets of the witches. However, the snippets you get, you can see how shocking they could be.
Yeah, I mean, the witches are described to be, you know, we had to argue, I remember in an essay, that the witches were the root of evil. You know, they were the ones who convinced Macbeth. You know, they're the ones who sort of set it all off, not Macbeth and not Lady Macbeth, but it was the witches. You know, they're being portrayed in a very negative light throughout the whole
They
play.
also seem to kind of like take control. They have a lot of control and power over, honestly, all of the other characters. So anything bad that the characters do is ultimately can be put down to these witches.
And again, so William Shakespeare liked to include aspects of the king. So especially in Macbeth, you can see the reminiscences of James I, James VI of Scotland.
Yeah, because he wanted to appease him, really, didn't he? So he could carry on writing.
The way that the witches were brought into the play is a storm, isn't it? They're brought on by a storm.
And it's that classic like cauldron, you know, they have like a little rhyme, don't they? It's
again, that, linking to that idea again about his wife who couldn't come over due to horrible storms.
There's also when we were studying, there's a lot of film adaptations of Macbeth. We saw. I remember watching one, like the entry of the witches in one, where they kind of like it was a large stretch of land, like really dark, like dark greys, with like misty clouds, and they kind of come walking in like little, like I don't know, like a little cult, like
literally.
There's those incantations as well. Like I don't know if this isn't in Macbeth, but it's that kind of like double trouble, you know, boil and that kind of thing.
Like
it's
incantations,
very, like,
chants.
I also saw this adaptation. I can't remember much about it, and I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was like it was more modern, so it was actually based in like a hospital. So where like the witches were these like doctors, and they basically just like, I can't remember exactly, but they were 3 doctors who basically killed these like patients, but they were undercover, so they were like undiscoverable, and they like met in like one of the like rooms and talked about it, and then went out and like kept on killing these people, but because they were so undiscoverable because they looked like all the other doctors, it was like they kind of got introduced in that way, so it's kind of like they're hidden within everyone, and you can't, it relates back to like nobody knows if you're a witch or not, so if there's signs of it you tell, but it's kind of hidden amongst everyone.
I think it's so interesting how we have this image of a witch in modern day, but in fact when we've looked at the past, and it doesn't matter what you look like, it would be anyone,
exactly,
and you know, you'd just be accused, and if you're accused, you're accused, but now we have this kind of interpretation of what we think a witch should be.
But even when Lady Macbeth is accused of being not a witch, but she goes hallucinogenic, doesn't she? And she believes she's got blood on her hands, and that could even have been a hella sign that obviously she was a witch, and she's hysterical because. But also, I remember my English teacher saying, he was like, the witches are the overseer of everything. They're always there. They may not always be on stage, but they are always there, and there's always, you get the feel of that presence.
Yeah.
But I was going to talk about the audience perspective. So imagine, you know, this is all kicked off, and you've got all of these witches being accused. You've got Malleus Maleficarum, you've got demonology, you've got your king screaming, watch out for witches. And then William Shakespeare brings us into the globe, and you're sat there and you're like, you would be scared to death of witches, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You would be shocked. You'd be like, why has he put them in the play? Yeah. And that's what drew his audiences in.
I mean, Shakespeare, again, he was a businessman, and he was writing to please his audiences and sell his, I'm assuming, sell his works.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he wanted to write things that would be interesting and, you know, but also current.
No, exactly.
Also, I'm not sure if this is, I think that's correct, but there was a point where he was so big where the king wanted him to like, so he was very noted as like, the king wanted to be perceived in a good way, because something was happening where he was like not as
the whole idea
powerful.
Was to appease,
and so the king wanted, like, spoke to Shakespeare and was like, I wanted to be put in a higher position, which is probably partly why Lady Macbeth was, you know, directing him, because then it showed him having no
power.
power.
But then again, Macbeth is the best way to see it over time because it's timeless, and even, you know, studying it up to nowadays for GCSE and stuff. So like I said, you think of the time then, how shocked people were. I remember my English teacher again saying to us, the witches may have been shocking back then, but to nowadays audience, the witches are not shocking at all because we take it as in...
We take it as fiction.
Fiction. Yeah. It's not a joke, but as in it's fiction. It's a story.
It's over dramatised. You know, to us it's obvious as this would never happen.
Yeah.
This is farce. It's make believe.
Yeah.
But you know, then those days could have been true.
Yeah, exactly.
In their opinion, could have been true.
Yeah, over the years. But Macbeth is one of my favourite things to think about, especially for the ultimate question, obviously, I've got to answer, which is how's witchcraft changed over time? You can see how people believed, and also like the religious changes, you can see it all throughout history of scared, believe in God, God is everything, the king will protect us from God, from the devil, who is his, you know, his worst enemy, and they both hate each other. To now
we come into like satanic rituals and
exactly
things like that, and that whole like cult kind of
cult
killing, you know, that's again Satan and worshipping the devil was, you know, based on witchcraft.
So I'd like to now go on and talk about tarot, however you pronounce it.
Tarot cards?
Tarot cards.
I see.
So, if you've been on TikTok,
yes.
My TikTok view page differs. However, I do seem to get a lot of tarot readings of a woman going, you're gonna find your soulmate and all this.
I usually skip past them.
A couple of my friends actually have taught themselves to read, well, not taught themselves, but like found out how to read tarot cards. It's quite interesting. I like looking into that kind of stuff just because it is.
I find it interesting. I'm not sure how much of a believer I am.
Oh yeah.
No,
I do find it interesting.
It's just a bit of fun.
Nowadays,
like, some people are like hardcore believers.
It's quite some of it's a lot, you know, entertainment kind of thing, isn't it? And
it's like gives you a bit of, I guess it gives you a sense of hope, because if you're getting like a reading that's like good, like you're in a tough place and you're getting a tarot reading that's telling you that like if you do this, you're going to get better. It's going to give you a bit of hope and kind of a way out.
I think it can be great. Yeah, great thing for
so
some
obviously,
people, definitely.
Witches, we'll go to Macbeth again. Obviously, they were seen to prophesise Macbeth's being king of Scotland, didn't they?
Not being killed by anyone born of a woman.
Yeah. So... And then I feel this is brought in. So obviously you had the idea of witches for a while, and then it did kind of die out. But it was still there, but it wasn't as big as a thing. And a lot of people were seen to be kind of fortune tellers was a big thing that kind of, especially in the last 100th century, it's really a big thing that brought in, you know, like fates and stuff like, you know, there's some, and white witches and stuff like that. They've been quite big nowadays. So this was taken from a website and written by Patty Wigginton. And tarot is probably one of the most popular used divination in the world today. While not as simple as some other methods like pendulums or tea leaves, the tarot has drawn people into its magic for centuries. So even linking to Harry Potter.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Disney. There's a lot of witch kind of imagery.
Oh my gosh,
Disney, isn't
look
there?
at all of the Disney villains.
They
all are linked to witches.
The one in Rapunzel.
And I was thinking Brave as well.
Yeah.
She goes and visits the witch with the bones and the woodwork.
That is weird.
Gives her food, and the apple in Snow White.
Yes.
You know, the Maleficent cursing.
A lot of the things that go wrong are based on these
it's all
witch-like characters.
I mean, apart from there's not really many male villains, but they're all kind of female, like witch-like villains.
Yeah. Well, if you look from Disney from its start to about the 80s, because that's when, to the 80s. Because I think one of the first Disney films that didn't have a female villain was probably like Beauty and the Beast or...
But even then he wasn't really a villain, was he?
No. But one of the last ones was, obviously you had Little Mermaid, you got Ursula. You've got...
She curses Ariel.
And she's called a sea witch.
She's a sea witch. It's all based
and she
on
has her little sidekicks of the two eels, doesn't she? Like, still
it's so prominent, isn't it? And that's what we're teaching children.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
that's what you learn from such a young age. It's ingrained into your brain.
Yeah. So although methods of reading tarot have changed over the years, many readers adopt their own unique style and traditional meanings of layout and stuff like that. And it's just been ingrained in history. So people used to use it as a parlour game back in probably the 1800s. However, over the years, obviously, it's changed into more of a populated thing that anyone can do, like you were saying with your friends that can do it.
So there's books on how to do it now.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting thing.
Oh,
yeah.
I'd love to.
I don't know how they interpret it.
Cards and stuff.
Yeah.
Have different meanings, and I think on like the way you put it out, because it's all based on like angels and like your spirit guides and that kind of thing, and they are basically, you know, they're the medium. So these cards are their way of speaking from these angels, and these angels like throwing out these cards, so it's basically sending you messages from like what's written on these cards. And they also have like things where the angels can like, because they are a medium, they can kind of like not talk to them, but like their words kind of are influenced by the angels, so it is really what their message is.
Yeah. It's like those like Ouija
boards.
Things like that, yeah.
Wouldn't touch one of those.
No, not for me, but you know, it's that kind of thing.
It's superstition.
It's superstition and communication, isn't it?
Yeah. None of us, I would say, really, we wouldn't say we believe in witches, but we wouldn't touch a Ouija board.
No.
Just in case, it's all superstition and we don't know anything.
But then, as well as that, there's, I guess, modern day witches or witchcraft. There's that, you know, it's that thing of natural healing or natural, it's that, you know, crystals, things like that.
Yeah, crystals, big.
Nowadays. Manifestation.
Like not magic spells, but like natural
manifesting.
Manifestation. You know, I don't think that's something that can be dismissed, but, you know.
But I do believe the old practices of witchcraft, like chanting and stuff, has been changed into modern day, but they've used different words for it to maybe not make it as...
It's not witchy, but it is. It's
A
modern day
lot of
witchcraft.
them are like genuinely like health benefits. Like there's a lot of herbal things that the witch probably would have been like, use that are actually really good for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's still a stigma around it though. Oh yeah. Like, I don't think not practicing, but like, you know, incorporating these things into your life, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but there's still a stigma around it. Yeah.
So
because witches have never really been accepted, have they?
There's always that unknown though. I feel like people are always very wary that like we don't actually know if it could be a thing. Obviously.
Yeah, people are like second guessing it.
Yeah. It's very much a questioned thing.
Yeah, so by the 18th century, people used to like lay divination out and all of these cards and stuff, and they used to lay out in different ways. But like nowadays, like we were touching on, tarot is mainly seen on TikTok, used for love life. That's the key one. They love to pop up, don't they? A telling future and being like, or it's even like prophecy readings and stuff like this. Yeah. And also, and people saying, there was one thing that I keep seeing, like, use this sound because a white witch has blessed it and all this, and you'll have good luck and all this. Yeah. And like, obviously, I'm very superstitious, but, you know, it's still very...
I'm not so much superstitious as you are, but I can see how, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know enough about modern day witchcraft and that kind of thing to be able to speak on it.
I don't believe in it necessarily, but I definitely entertain the idea. So like, if a video comes up, I will watch the whole thing.
This is a really weird story. So basically, my family were on holiday, and I had a wart on my knee, and like my family on one side were fascinated and were like, we need to get rid of it. So they took me to a white witch.
Really?
A self-proclaimed white witch, and they had to, like, I can't really even remember what they did to my knee, but like they had to try and get rid of it. And it's really weird. Like thinking about it now, I'm
How
like,
old were you?
Oh, like 8.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
It's gone now, but like I don't think it was that made it go. I think it was just like.
So where were you?
France.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
It is weird, but like even white witches nowadays are a big thing. Like healing's
really come I've never heard of white witches.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. I think that's just because it's not.
Yeah, I don't know too much about it.
No, I knew that there were like modern day witches, but again, I don't know enough to be able to. You know,
it's weird.
Talk about it.
But like white witches, like can also be like. Is it Glinda in Wicked or the nice one in Wizard of Oz? I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Glinda.
Glinda, in Wizard of Oz.
The good witch.
Like she's the good witch. So, but she's not a fairy, is she? Because
No,
fairies are normally seen as good, but she's a witch.
We've still got this good witch, bad witch, haven't we? With the wicked witch.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, yes, in the show she does try and kill Dorothy. Like, she's not a great lady, you know, she's not, but she's still a witch being portrayed as bad.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of what we talked about.
Yeah.
So talking about more typical witches, you know, we love the random things they like to be associated with. So why do witches ride brooms and the history behind the legend?
That was really fascinating.
So this was written by Sarah Pruitt. And so it's not actually clear when the broom itself was first invented, but the act of sweeping, you know, sweeping your floor goes back to ancient times.
In the old days, that's a very womanly thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Also a lower class thing.
Yeah, sweeping. If you don't have servants,
if you're higher class, you're not going to sweep your own floors.
Yeah, exactly.
This is in the past day. No one has servants anymore. But
so from the beginning, brooms were associated with women, as you were saying, and this household object became a powerful symbol of like the domestic of women.
Yeah.
The first witch to confess to riding a broom was a man.
How
magical is this? We've had women all the way through, and now we've got a bloke. So his name was Guillaume Edlin, and Edlin was a priest from Saint-Germain-en-Laye near Paris. He was a French witch. So, and he was arrested in 1453 and tried for witchcraft after publicly criticising the church warnings about witches. His confession came under torture once again, and he eventually repented, but still in prison for life. So he wasn't actually like hung, but he was in prison for life. Okay.
So this was a man witch here.
A man witch claiming he read a broom.
Would you call a man witch a wizard?
Well, I don't know. They were still known as witches.
They were, weren't they?
Which we kind of love, but kind of don't like
either.
It's
a different thing, isn't it? That's going to be like spells and like rather than curses. And, you know.
So the
wizards seem to be more like knowledgeable
and saviour.
Yeah, like Dumbledore. Wizards are viewed as like wise and
Dumbledore,
you know, like these powerful beings, and then you've got witches who are evil.
Yeah. So if you look at Bellatrix Lestrange is a very good example of a witch in Harry Potter. She is your most, if you look at all of the characters, she's the one you look at and you go, you look the most like a witch. Mental hair, horrible teeth, the black clothing, the evil, the cackle, that's another thing, isn't it? The typical witch cackle. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not even going to try.
No. So by the time, we'll go back to our lovely man witch, Edlin's confession, the idea of witches riding around on broomsticks was already well established. The earliest known image of witches on brooms. So basically he was the first one to actually confess.
Okay.
But so there was earlier images.
I mean, we all know that people can't fly.
Exactly. Like, come on, guys.
You know, people can't fly.
I can see him running around the little village like, on his broom.
And what time, do you know what time that was?
So this was predating James, so this was 1453 he was.
So they weren't even thinking about flying yet.
No, exactly. So the idea of witches riding around on broomsticks was well established. The earliest known image of witches on brooms dates to 1451, when two illustrations appeared in the French poet Martin Lefranc's manuscript of Le Champion des Dames, the Defender of the Ladies. In the two drawings, one woman soars through the air on a broom and the other flies aboard a plain white stick. How interesting. Both wear headscarves and identify them as members of a Christian sector found in the 12th century. But they were both branded as heretics by the Catholic Church because obviously they're not Catholic, so they've got to be a heretic.
It's not really clear where the idea of the brooms came from. It's just a thing that's associated with them, much like the hat. Where does the hat come from and the cauldron?
Yeah.
What is that about?
I mean, the cauldron I can see with the whole
spells
and mixtures.
What's with the hats?
The hat is such a weird thing.
Yeah, because obviously headwear was mainly worn. So women would, in this time, would wear caps and they would tie them. And women's hair was very covered. Only rich women would have it up. Mm-hmm. And even throughout history, women all had their hair. But I'm guessing the hat must have come out of maybe a woman wearing it and people being like, she must be a witch.
Because it's more like a top hat.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When you think about it, which is saying what men wear.
So, And anthropologist Robin Skelton suggests the association between witches and brooms may have roots in the pagan fertility ritual.
Oh, interesting. So it all comes back to pagans as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, rural farmers would leap and dance astride poles, pitchforks or brooms in the light of the full moon to encourage growth for their crops. So again, weird summoning dances which people could link to being, you know... This broomstick dance...
It's anything out of the norm, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is the whole idea of what society, quote unquote, should be like.
Yeah.
Conforming to society,
yeah.
So this broomstick dance, she writes, became a confessed with common accounts of witches flying through the night on their way to... The way they described was an orgy, but I'm guessing it's a party with other illicit meetings. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of the 17th century, accounts of witches using broomsticks to fly up out of chimneys became more common, as women became closely associated with the household and domestic sphere than ever before. And popular anxiety about witchcraft had subsided by the 18th century, although there were still plenty of self-identified witches in the United States today.
So by the 18th century, we're not prosecuting witches anymore?
No, so it's kind of a trend, and it's like,
okay, so
you
that's
know,
died out.
So it died out pretty quickly.
Yeah. But it was such a massive part of history.
For ages
For
as well.
a long time.
Like a good probably 100 years.
Yeah,
exactly. So, like I said, again, you've still got witches now, but they're obviously not being condemned, they're not doing anything wrong.
I think there's still a negative...
connotation around them.
But not so much like we see Harry Potter again. We talked about that today. That's modern media. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like everyone's equal there. You know, there's no like necessarily bad thing against the witches there. And that's, you know, seen in quite a positive story. You know, people are obsessed with Harry Potter. They love
exactly.
it. You know, I remember as a child wanting. Well, I'm still technically a child, but everyone wanting to be like. Hermione, or like, you know, get their Hogwarts letter.
I want to be like Hermione, and I haven't even watched it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more positive now, but then you've got things like, you know, Wizard of Oz, we talked about it, it's still negative. And, you know, people are very apprehensive of that kind of thing.
I think connotations of witches has just changed all through, because I think...
Does that answer your question then?
It could do, because, so... We'll do a bit of an evaluation of my lovely question, which is how has witchcraft changed over the centuries? And I believed it's changed through two factors. One being religion and the influence of religion in people's lives. And the second being just how quickly a trend can die out and people really not have that worry about it.
We've got the ideas of society as well and conforming to society. Because we started in episode 1 with sorcery.
Yeah.
And how, you know... It was like magic, and this is interesting, and you know, people like magic, and then we've got the prosecution of women and some men as witches, in when religion was such a massive part, and I think that's what's brought it up to where we stopped.
It also,
you know, the prosecution.
It also comes along with education.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
saying that, you know, in this day and age, someone's tried to start something like that. We have the science to prove it's not real.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we can tell that if you're going to prick someone in a certain place, you're not going to draw blood.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, we have all of that medical knowledge to say, like, that's just not,
it's just
not going to happen.
And again, the idea of illiteracy. And
that's a massive thing.
having someone telling you you're a witch, you're going to be like, I'll be a witch, sure.
People can speak for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if someone called me out in the street and went, you're a witch, I'll be like, no, I'm not.
Everyone would just look at them
And be like
that,
they would be the crazy one.
Because we, you know, we've been educated, and I think it's worth commenting on women's rights and, you know, viewings in society. Like, I'm not saying it's perfect. Oh, cat. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it has...
Black cat.
Black cat just jumped right up at me. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it has improved somewhat from, you know, hundreds of years ago when, you know, women were, you know, just childbearers, really. And I think as they've had more rights and been able to learn, and, you know, we all go to school and we get to learn. It's not true for every woman in the world at the moment. But
particularly in the UK.
In the UK, we get our education and we can be educated.
And we have to be in education until we're 18. It's
exactly.
thing now, we have to be educated.
And everyone has to read and write and everything like that.
As that's come to play, you know, people are starting to, have realised that, you know, we're not witches. You know, we can think for ourselves. Yeah. And we're allowed to be ambitious, and we're allowed to be have lust and, you know, have all those things.
An example of illiteracy again, Witchfinder, BBC, and he's trying to take her to this trial to go find Matthew Hopkins so he can get his promotion to condemn her. and he'd read out this proclamation, which he'd claimed it was saying Matthew Hopkins, this man's got to take Thomasine Gooch, the accused witch, to Chelmsford, and we're going to accuse her there. However, this thing didn't say that, but she can't read. Yeah. She goes, I don't know how to read it. Exactly. I don't know what it says. So people are going to believe, if you ask someone to read a letter, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're not going to tell you what you should, or what it actually says.
Yeah. And it's very easy to lie in that sense as well. Like if I can't read and someone's telling me what this is saying, there's no way I can know if that's true.
And you can't prove them wrong.
Can't prove
them wrong. Exactly.
You have to believe them.
And we were talking about that idea of being defenceless again, weren't we?
Exactly. But I think it's all obviously religion, and I think the main drive from it was the Adam and Eve story and the sin Eve proclaimed on this world.
Devil worshipping,
and also the power of the monarchy at that time, because the monarchy doesn't have as much power now as it did before. It's got, the government is now above the monarchy.
Yeah, I mean the monarchy still have a social influence today, but not a political influence, really.
In that time, the monarchy was obviously with James. He was very, very a potent person in this whole thing.
Yeah, like he did it himself. He went after witches himself, and if you've got the monarchy doing that, then everyone's going to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. They are the monarchy. They are the top. They are one with God. Really.
In this time,
divine right.
Yeah, and then nowadays, it's different to that. So you've got witchcraft not being so prosecuted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm guessing that brings us... But I think the best example to prove the evaluation of witchcraft is Macbeth, and I will keep going back to that. Yeah. Because you can... The way the audience reacts to that play and the impact of witches that in the play... And you can really see from the 1600s all the way up to the 21st century now how different people would react to that.
Yeah, like now we look at it and we're like, we're talking about it. It's like a fart. It's like it's fantasy, isn't it?
Important actually wasn't that society. Yeah. So it wasn't important, and if the play wasn't a key part of society at that point, we wouldn't still be learning about it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, like why did we learn about it today? Because it was it was confirming what the king was telling them.
Yeah.
But we don't know Shakespeare's intentions.
And Shakespeare, I think, was just doing it. Yeah.
Who knows?
I think he was really doing it to just appease the king, and I think that was...
Probably, because everyone inherently is selfish.
Yeah.
In their own minds, again, there's probably some science behind that, but, it's just how we are.
Yeah.
Even if we don't realise.
Thank you for joining me once again.
I hope we've answered your question.
Yes.
And helped
fingers
your
crossed.
I feel like it sums it up perfectly that we've got a black cat with us.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for listening, and go and listen to my other episodes if you are still interested. Thank you.